Namaskar. In series of psychoanalysis and philosophy, today we are picking psychoanalysis and Ayurveda. Ayurveda is the oldest science of human health and well-being. It deals with both physical and psychological well-being. Psychoanalysis deals with psychological well-being by healing pathology. Since the two disciplines share an overlap in the area of psychological health, it is interesting to explore the intersection. Guiding us into this common space and thereon to a conference is psychoanalysis consultant Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaskar, sir.
Namaste.
Ayurveda is not well known as a healing approach to psychological problems. Why is it so?
Truth is paradoxical. Irony is, Ayurveda is the only pathy which gives the most comprehensive definition of health. Allopathy defines health largely by negation, whereas Ayurveda positively defines health as a comprehensive state of well-being, which includes both physical and psychological well-being. Therefore, it is very natural that Ayurveda, in its ancient best of times, would deal with psychological sicknesses also. It is not well known today because there are few Ayurvedic practitioners who are adept enough to use Ayurveda to get good results in the area of mental health. So it is a question of a lost science, lost knowledge, lost art, lost skill. Irony is that today, if you look at non-allopathic alternatives, apart from psychotherapy, homeopathy is far more used than Ayurveda for psychological sicknesses. One of the difficulties here is when you go to an Ayurvedic practitioner, a general Ayurvedic practitioner, and this covers almost 95% of practitioners, they try to analyze and heal psychological problems by analyzing them in terms of Vat, Pitta and Kapha, and using the same generic approach of food, lifestyle and medicine to bring about a balance of Vat, Pitta and Kapha. And this, more often than not, does not give results. And that's one of the reasons why, although in ancient times, Ayurveda had an extensive application and a very effective application in areas of both physical health and mental health, today, in mental health, you hardly ever hear of Ayurveda. So it is more a question of lost science than deficiency of that science per se in its entire lifespan.
So, when you say that it appears to be incomplete or lost version of it, does that mean that in the initial stages there were some better, deeper understanding with the psychological realm, or rather put it this way, that if at all Ayurveda look at the causation and healing of psychological problems to be addressed using their principles?
Yes, not only in ancient times was there an elaborate science, even today there are some practitioners, few of them, rare of them, not only few but actually rare, who are capable of making a substantial difference in the area of mental health. But they are very few in number and mostly outside the formal system of Ayurveda, which is flowing from the Ayurvedic colleges and with formal degrees. So the type of practitioners we are referring to mostly are those who are in the intersection of Ayurveda and Tantra or Ayurveda and Yoga, and mostly are independent of the formal system. Now, coming to the question that you asked, how does Ayurveda look at the causation of psychological sickness? In a generic sense, it is definitely a question of balancing Vata, Pitta and Kapha, but in details, it's a question of digestion. Because Ayurveda looks at the concept of digestion in a very extensive way. It is not only digestion of food, but digestion of anything, and that includes psychological feelings, thoughts, stimuli, and so on. So the idea there is, if you are not able to digest certain psychological experiences, it results in a problem. And therefore, for digestion, you need a very strong fire, Agni, to digest. So Ayurveda talks about Jathar Agni, which is the Agni in the stomach, and another form of Agni which operates in the mind, Sukshma Agni. And what happens is that usually it is said, there are three opinions of this. One is that the total Agni is constant, and if you have more of Jathar Agni, you have less of the mental Agni. Some people say it is not true. It's a function of overall Agni. If the overall Agni goes up, both the Agnis go up. And then the question comes, apart from constitution, what all else is this Agni dependent upon? And there the whole of psychology comes in and the whole of mysticism comes in. Because then, apart from diet, lifestyle, early life experiences become very important in generation of the strength of this mental Agni. Ayurveda also goes into the aspect of karma and reincarnation, also in the aspect of spirit possession. So all these factors, they are taken up as causing psychological sickness. So if you look at pathogenesis from an Ayurvedic standpoint, you cannot escape the concept of mental digestion, mental fire, and the effect of karma, reincarnation, spirit possession, apart from your constitution and early life experiences. So when you talk about healing these things, the generic prescription is that you have to increase the sattva and reduce the tamas and reduce the rajas. If necessary, convert first tamas into rajas and rajas into sattva. But overall goal is to enhance the sattva and reduce the rajas and the tamas, because it is believed that if you talk in terms of gunas, it is the excess of rajas and tamas which leads to psychological problems, not an excess of sattva. So the idea there is to strengthen the Agni, the mental part of the Agni, so that the tamas can be converted to rajas, rajas into sattva, and overall sattva can be enhanced, rajas and tamas can be minimized, thereby enabling the strengthening of mental Agni, digestion of all the experiences, so that nothing remains as traumatic, undigested. What we call trauma would be called undigested psychological material. So all
that we usually take up as for processing the parts. It's a digestion of the trauma.
So what we say working through is digestion. So this is how Ayurveda deals with it, and psychological health is an area where Ayurveda has a strong intersection with yoga, with tantra, and with Hindu mysticism in general.
So when we are talking about different ailments and specifically psycho ailments, we see that psychosomatic problems are still considered somewhere in the realm of Ayurveda or homeopathy. So how does Ayurveda deals in particular with the psychosomatic problems?
Ayurveda recognizes that there is a psychological aspect to problems. But if you go to an Ayurvedic practitioner today, most of them don't actually have the knowledge and the skill to clearly understand to the roots the psychological aspect of sickness and deal with it. So they would give generic prescriptions like uh, doing yoga, getting into a meditative state, doing pranayam, getting into relaxation and keeping the mind relaxed, enhancing the sattva, reducing the rajas and tamas. So this generic guidance and generic prescription would be there. But very few of them would actually be able to make out which symptom is out of food and lifestyle difficulty and which symptom is out of a psychological difficulty. And that is where something very important we have to recognize. First, if there is a problem which is occurring because of a psychological issue, and if you try to solve it by food and lifestyle adjustment, neither the problem is solved. Instead, you will end up creating a new problem for yourself. Let me give an example. Let us say, because of repressed sadness, you have a lot of mucus formation, and that is leading to asthmatic problem. Now, the standard prescription would be that the kapha is too much, and therefore we have to reduce kapha and increase pitta to bring about balancing of doshas. So what they would say is, take medicine which has black pepper, long pepper, dry ginger, and so on. Don't eat anything cold. Don't eat anything which can create mucus, and take this medication. Now, if the source of this medication is, the source of the symptom is psychological, and you keep taking this medicine for a long time, what will happen is that kapha production will not stop, but you will start having unbalanced pitta. So previously you had unbalanced kapha. After taking medication, you will have unbalanced kapha and unbalanced pitta. And therefore, in the long run, you will see that in case of chronic sicknesses which are psychosomatic and somebody is trying to deal with them from an Ayurvedic standpoint, in the long run, most of them end up in a situation where all the three are unbalanced. Kapha, Pitta and Vata, all the three are unbalanced. It's very difficult then to give medications because you try to reduce one and the other increases. So then there is a very restricted inventory of medications which you can use to balance all the three when all the three are out of proportion. This is an instance where it is better to combo homeopathy with allopathy or take only homeopathy rather than Ayurveda, because you might end up aggravating another dosha trying to heal the first difficulty, because the first difficulty is largely because of a psychological issue in the unconscious and not because of food and lifestyle. So there we have to make a discrimination that given what the Ayurvedic practitioners are today, most of them, if the psychosomatic problem is essentially rooted in something psychological, better to go for homeopathy than Ayurveda, unless the Ayurvedic practitioner knows deeply how to deal with the psychological difficulty of that problem from a Ayurvedic or yogic or tantric standpoint.
That's very interesting. The practices in Ayurveda is widespread. So geographically also throughout the continent, and also in the area of learnedness. There are people who are practicing, but they are not. But there is another part. So does Ayurveda go into that rare areas of longevity, resuscitation, spiritual state creation by Somrasa, like as it is mentioned in the olden scriptures? These days, when we talk about any of the people who are into Ayurveda, they just smile about it and they say that they just know in the scriptures. They do not know anything beyond that. There is a mention, but not everybody is well aware. How would you take up the part in the discussions about this?
You rightly mentioned it that there is a esoteric aspect of Ayurveda. And that esoteric aspect of Ayurveda has extensive engagement with the psychological world, psycho-spiritual world, I would say. And some part of that engagement also is in psychological healing. And another part of it is into mysticism and spirituality. This takes us to the use of substances in Ayurveda, which traditionally have been used as medicines. Today we would call them as psychedelics. And they were used to heal psychological difficulties, also for spiritual exploration. There also were certain Ayurvedic preparations which were able to bring about a very peaceful state of mind and were acting almost like psychiatric medications would act today. Now we get references to these substances in ancient texts. We hear about them from some rare practitioners, but we don't find them in the mainstream Ayurvedic practice. We also don't find them in research literature of Ayurveda. So it looks like it is more like a lost knowledge waiting to be re-established.
Sometimes, like in general discussions, I have also heard people say that what was Sanjeevani once upon a time is the modern world's ajwain or the same family in the kitchen which we use because of its amazing, extraordinary medicinal properties. It can be part of certain things because these particular herbs were found somewhere in the Himalaya areas where they have got extinct, and so did the knowledge got extinct along.
Right. In fact, I can just add here a bit. One of my gurus, he told me that he had experienced taking of Sanjeevani.
Okay.
And he passed away a few years ago. And he once mentioned it to me that he used to go to Himalayas and he had experienced taking Sanjeevani there. And his experience was that it takes you into a state of suspended animation where you are aware. The mind is aware. You can think, you can breathe, but the entire digestive tract and everything else almost goes into a kind of hibernation. And for a long time, one is able to live without food and without water. Now, this is something which many of us would find it difficult to believe. But if we take it to be true, then obviously he was given that by his guru, and which means that there still is a group of people who know about it. And I can also add to it one more incident from spiritual literature. There is a book by Sri M, and Sri M is still alive. And he mentions in that book that he was given some liquid before something transformative was attempted on his mind. And it was a greenish liquid, which means that it may be, we don't know what it is, but it was one of those rare herbal preparations like Sanjeevani, which possibly are known to a very few. And waiting to be brought into mainstream probably.
Amazing and very interesting it is. In the beginning of the discussion, we talked about some overlapping of these two beautiful practices, Ayurveda and psychoanalysis. Can the two be mutually enriched also?
Yes, the answer is of course yes. If you ask me how, I have half an answer. It's one of the situations where I would say I don't have an answer to your question. That does not mean I will not answer your question. It's a situation where we have to open up the area and we don't have to conclude and complete everything in our lifetime. If we do everything, what will the future generations do? So it's one of those areas which probably in our lifetime we will open up, take a few steps, but neither complete nor conclude decisively on most of the issues. Let us open up this area. Take, for example, a few concepts which we can take from one area to another and attempt a kind of intersection. Mutual enrichment. We see sadism and masochism centered in anal phase. From an Ayurvedic standpoint, can we say that in the anal phase, the pitta part goes up? We see oral rage in the oral phase. Can we say there the pitta part goes up and suddenly goes down, although it's largely a kapha part? When we look at bipolar, can we
But
say,
does that mean, I'm sorry, I have some doubt here.
uh,
Are we talking about the libido as one of the pitta energy moving around, or it is something else?
okay, I forgot to mention the last answer I should have. If you try to create an equivalence between kapha, pitta and vata and psychological effects, it comes like this. Excess of aggression, anger, it leads to high pitta. Excess of pain leads to high mucus, high kapha. Excess of anxiety leads to high vata. Now, what was your question? Can you repeat again? I went off track.
I just wanted to, so as you were discussing that in the anal phase, you would see the rise in pitta.
Right.
And when it moves to the oral phase, where the oral rage is high, there is that energy is moving in a different way. So if the pitta and the kapha, and what is directing it, is it the libido which is directing it towards the anal phase and the oral phase?
It's a good question. What is directing it is actually our core genetic structure or the core psychological personality if we believe in karma.
Basically, it again becomes the constitution of a
Yeah,
being,
yeah.
both karmic and physical.
Yes, and not only individual, because this is common to the race. Everyone passes through the same phases, oral, anal, phallic. So which means that this is governed by something genetic which is common to the species, although the intensity, duration, and the nature of each is individual. So when we say that this is a species constant, that all human infants pass through this psychosexual development phase. So which means that that species constant, that genetic constant of the species is guiding this arrival and departure of the phase.
Okay.
Now, the way it is doing it, we don't know, but one of the ways it may do is that if it is making arrival and departure of a phase happening through many ways, one of the ways can be, one of the variables in that process can be this Vat, Pitta and Kapha. Even if that is not so, we can at least study. Even if we don't say that the causality of the phases, psychosexual phases, involves the processes of Vat, Pitta and Kapha, even if we don't say this, at least at the minimum we can study the increase and reduction of the three doshas in the psychosexual stages. Like in oral stage, what is number 1? Vat, Pitta or Kapha. What is number 2? What is number 3? As we go into the anal phase, how does the sequence change? As we go into the phallic phase, how does the sequence change? Now, this can be one way to start off an inquiry. Another way is, let us look at bipolar. And we see too much of Kapha or Prithvi element will cause the lower cycle. Too much of Vat will cause the upper cycle. So by that token, when the upper cycle is on, Ayurveda would use all the oils possible to reduce the Vat. Similarly, when it comes to healing, let's say somebody has a psychosomatic problem of low BP. That would be because of increased Kapha, because of psychological pain which is repressed. How do you increase the Pitta then to balance it out? Or take another example. A person comes with a particular problem, let's say very high aggression or psychosomatic manifestation of aggression on the skin. Then how can you use Ayurvedic diet to reduce it to some extent, whatever extent you can? Maybe it increases, maybe it helps 5 to 10%, and the rest of the work might have to be done by psychotherapy, but still you have a 10% assistance by bringing in this concept. Similarly, it's worth a try, and people have researched this, how breathing, massage, diet, panchkarma can bring in relaxation, enhance the sattvic phases in the mind, and thereby help us to do healing to some extent, at least of the mild and mild to moderate pathology. Severe and moderate to severe might not be very plastic to this approach, but mild and mild to moderate usually are plastic to some degree to this holistic approach. And on an average, it's an open area for future research. We are just opening up a investigation.
As always, very interesting discussion that opens up an area for further contemplation. Hope our viewers enjoyed the discussion. See you all again. Namaskar, sir.
Namaste.